I went downstairs, outside. I crept up into the barn. I was so scared to look inside, but I had to.
What did you see, Clarice? What did you see?
Lambs. They were screaming.
I always saw her in this part. And it was funny because she was campaigning for this part before the screenplay was ever finished.
They were slaughtering the spring lambs.
They were screaming.
And you ran away?
No.
I really only like to do movies that I believe in and that I really love and I'm committed to. And I sort through every piece of material I can to try and find that.
I opened the gate to their pen, but they wouldn't run. They just stood there, confused. They wouldn't run.
But you could, and you did, didn't you?
Yes. I took one lamb and I ran away as fast as I could.
When I started doing the research for Silence, I went to Quantico and spent some time there, spent a few days there, and spent some time with a real agent who was young and small and all of those things, and so she sort of resembled Clarice in a lot of ways. I spent some time with John Douglas, who sort of is the godfather of psychological profiling and is, I guess, the model for the Crawford character in the movie, and sat in on some of his classes and some other classes there at Quantico, and I was surprised. There was a lot for me to learn that I didn't know, and especially coming from the background that I came with all sorts of prejudices about who the FBI is.
Jodie Foster spent quite a bit of time here at the National Center. We wanted her to see some of the crime scene photographs. I wanted her to experience some of the stress of this job.
She actually went out on the obstacle course that we fondly call the Yellow Brick Road with one of our new agents' classes. I don't know whether I was surprised, but I sure was impressed.
They viewed this film as a kind of a recruiting film for female agents, which at the time was a big issue for them. And they thought this would be a positive force in attracting women to the FBI.
There were kind of a lot of jokes in the movie, and I was getting really nervous and feeling very nervous about it, and really took him aside and said, you know, I just hope you're not going to try and make this like, haha, aren't the FBI funny? They wear really ugly clothes and they, you know, are uncool. You know, I hope you're not going to take that path, because the subjectivity of the book is specifically from the perspective of Clarice, and she takes them really seriously. And he laughed and sat me down and said, oh, of course not. And said, no, I want you to know that I'm on her side, and that I feel that this film is about Clarice's perspective and about the strong heart that she has, and how that the strength of her heart, the bravery of that heart is what makes her the great hero of the film. So he kind of dispelled my worries.
Clarice brings a very specific kind of empathy for the victims of Buffalo Bill because she is a woman, and she understands how much women walk through the world aware of the potential that they are going to be the victims of violence at the hands of men. When she goes and looks at the belongings of some of the earlier victims, she has a real empathy that comes from understanding that their belongings represent the kind of women they were. Eventually, that leads her in the right direction, and it's something that other people aren't seeing, specifically that men aren't seeing, because it's something that's so specific to women's lives, to women's concerns, to women's sensibilities. And that's part of what makes Clarice a great character.
Although she's the focus of the book, she's not a very flashy character. You know, she's not somebody who weeps uncontrollably or who beats her chest a lot, and she's somebody who's very internal and who's quiet. And I think my mom, for example, and other people have said to me, why do you want to play that part? You just won an Academy Award. Don't you want to you can do anything. Or people saying, well, you just won an Oscar. Why would you beg for a part? You know, why would you fly to New York and say, I want to be your second choice? That's humiliating. Why would you ever do such a thing? And I said, you know, I just really love this book, and I just want to be a part of the process. I want to be a part of that book. And there was that. But there was also something else I think that I really liked. Having played a lot of victims in my life and wondering why that pattern had happened in my career. I sat back and looked at this piece and felt like it was a departure for me, that instead of being the one who was trapped in the pit, that I was the character who was compelled by her destiny in some ways. She knew some place in her heart that she had to save women. So it was a departure for me in terms of the work that I had done, but it was also some kind of psychological completion for me.
Clarice Starling in particular comes from an extremely difficult background, a background that prepared her, toughened her to do what she's done with her life, to get into the FBI Academy at Quantico, to complete a very difficult training course, and one that doesn't favor women, and particularly didn't favor women at the time that the novel was written and the first film was made, and equips her to go head-to-head with Hannibal Lecter, whose specialty is messing with other people's heads. And there's a lot in her head to mess with, and he knows it. And yet he develops a certain affection for her, perhaps because he sees that he's talking to somebody who is about as smart as he is, but different in some way that he doesn't find offensive or threatening.
I've had it very much in mind that I wanted to look for every single opportunity to visually emphasize this struggle of the young woman against the male world to save the other young woman. So even at Quantico, we had a terrific opportunity to set that up very easily by having Jodie, who was relatively shorter than most of the men she encountered. And I tried to cast tall whenever possible with men to emphasize this sort of this physical implied power of these men over the shorter woman. And we wanted to make sure that we shot the film very, very much from Clarice's literal point of view, so that you know, when we could have endless shots of men looking unpleasantly, more often than not, you know, directly into the camera, directly into Clarice's eyes.
Jonathan captured it beautifully, the way these guys look at her, this outsider, this girl.
You know, for me, Clarice, it was also about her voice, mostly because she was somebody that had been scarred by the bleeding of the lambs, you know, and the sound, and how there was nothing that she could do to help them, and she couldn't speak, and she had that child's voice. The fact that she was, you know, somebody who was scarred by that, and in that way she had this kind of quietness, that she never used contractions. You know, she said do not instead of don't, and trying to be somebody that was correct, and that didn't come from the background that she came from, that there was a lot of, not so much apology, but an almost a shame that she wasn't bigger, that she wasn't stronger, that she wasn't louder, that in her past she had failed. You know, I think that was the part for me, once I understood that sense of this person trying to overcome the failure of what they were born, the body they were born in. I understood that that was her strength. You know, that her handicap, in some ways, that she was just like the victims. She was just, you know, another girl, so just another girl in another town. The fact that she could relate to those victims made her the hero of the film.
Jodie Foster never stopped campaigning for the part. Jonathan met with her again after the whole business with Michelle Pfeiffer fell through. And I said, what changed your mind about her? And Jonathan said, I watched her coming down the hall towards me. He said, this sturdy little figure striding along with this determined look on her face. And he said, I just thought, that's her. That's Clarice Starling.
Well, I loved her strength and her character. And I mean that in the largest way, in terms of the things that make her who she is, the unconscious things that she doesn't even know about, the things that draw her to her fate in some ways. I mean, I think she is a great American hero in some ways, and somebody who will, whose lot in life is to save innocent people and to come to terms with their own fears while at the same time.